Okay, colleagues, good afternoon. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us this afternoon. I know it's a very busy week, and so I'm really grateful to all of you for joining us this afternoon. I'm particularly grateful to the DG and the High Commissioner, Tatiana, Volker. Thank you so much for taking the time this afternoon. The purpose of the meeting is the following. In light of the recent developments around the Secretary General's UN80 initiative, I have invited the DG and the High Commissioner to brief and to exchange with the members and the observers of the Council on the impact of this UN80 initiative on the human rights architecture, in particular in Geneva, and of course in particular on the Human Rights Council. Can I quickly remind you, the UN80 initiative was launched by the Secretary General, and it has 3 work streams. All 3 have an impact on our work on human rights, on the human rights architecture here. Work stream 1 is on efficiency and improvements. And this is, I think, the most important expression at this point is the revised estimates, the so-called revised estimates, the new reduced budget that the Secretary General submitted in New York is currently under consideration by ACABQ and will soon be in 5th Committee. We would be interested, to the extent possible, to hear from our guests what is your assessment on the impact of the revised estimates, the decreasing of the budget on UN Geneva, on the High Commissioner's Office, and consequently on the Council. And maybe you can outline for us where you see the next steps happening in New York. We would be very grateful for an update of what we as members and observers of the Council should anticipate in terms of resources available from your 2 offices, from these 2 streams, for the organization of the meetings of the Council, but also for the implementation of the mandates. Workstream 2 is on mandate implementation review. You remember that at the end of July, the Secretary General published a report on mandate implementation review, and on the 2nd of September, the UN General Assembly established an informal ad hoc working group on mandate implementation review, co-chaired by Jamaica and New Zealand. This track is really now, as I understand it, the primary responsibility of the member states. Last week, when I was in New York to present the report of the Human Rights Council to the General Assembly, I had the opportunity to meet the 2 co-chairs, Ambassador Caroline Schwalger of New Zealand and Ambassador Brian Wallace of Jamaica. They are very interested in the work that we do here in Geneva in terms of rationalization and efficiency, including the High Commissioner Office's mandate mapping tool. And I will continue to see with the co-facilitators in New York and their colleagues here in Geneva how we can collaborate on this aspect. Workstream 3 is on structural changes and program realignment. That brings me back to the 2 guests. We would really much appreciate hearing more about the current status of reflections on institutional change that concerns the human rights pillar within the United Nations, and also hear what are the next steps in that process. Now, we, of course, understand that these processes and discussions are still underway, and that any information that you can provide us today are probably of a preliminary nature, and we all know how reluctant the Secretariat usually is to provide information that is not yet formalized and totally reliable. But you know, when we had discussions among members and observers of the Council, there were 2 issues coming back regularly. One, we don't want to weaken further the human rights pillar, and 2, we would like to have transparency. We need to know what's going on so we can best prepare to make this pillar, to protect the pillar, but also to make it more efficient. So please, to the extent possible, give us as much information, specific information as possible. Now, about how we're going to do this afternoon. This is an informal meeting, so the speaking arrangements that I suggest are the following. We will have presentations to begin with from the Director General and the High Commissioner. Then I will invite delegations wishing to take the floor to raise their name plates, the good old way with the non-electronic. Then we will see how many, I will ask you to raise it all at once so we have an idea of how many speakers we have. We will have to finish here at 2:15 at the latest because there is a UPR going on this afternoon. So I will probably have to ask you to be relatively brief. We will see how many speakers we have. We don't have interpretation because it's informal. So thank you very much for bearing with us. If everybody's okay with that. DG, the floor is yours. Thank you very much for taking time.
Thank you very much, dear President of the Human Rights Council, dear High Commissioner, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. Well, of course, we will not talk just about the impact of UN80 initiative. I will have also to mention our ongoing liquidity crisis, because, as was already said, even with UN80 initiative and the project, the draft of the revised budget, we can't confirm exactly what kind of impact it will have on Human Rights Council, but we can make some very serious prediction. But with the impact of the liquidity crisis, which could be also very significant, it's not possible to make any predictions now. The only prediction of which I am sure it will also have impact on all our activities, unfortunately. That's why I would like to start maybe with the request once again to the member states about paying their contributions on time and in full at the beginning of the next year, because the next year is really going to be very, very difficult. As was already said, UN80 initiative has 3 dimensions, and it's very important to remember that it's not the result of our liquidity situation. It's exactly the aim to make UN stronger, more fit for purpose, and to implement the Pact of the Future. That's exactly the aim of the UN80 initiative. Of course, I will concentrate mostly on workstream number 1, operational efficiencies and improvements, which is within the authority of Secretary General. Of course, the final decisions will be made by the member states. Secretary General, as a result of the report of the working group led by USG Catherine Pollard, made his suggestions, and now we have the project of the revised 2026 UN program budget already with the ACBQ. We hope that it will go to the 5th committee as soon as possible, and the budget could be approved before the end of the year. And I think it's important, just to quote what Secretary General said when he was briefing 3 weeks ago the 5th committee, that these revised estimates are pragmatic response to evolving fiscal realities and member states' expectations. So all in all, within the budget, Secretary General suggests a reduction of the whole budget by 15.1% for the whole system. In terms of posts, the proposed reduction is 18.8% as compared with the approved 2025 staffing tables. These significant reductions have been very carefully calibrated in order to maintain balance across organizational 3 pillars: peace and security, human rights, and sustainable development. These revised estimates include 2 types of efficiencies: target efficiencies on the one hand, and when we speak about targeted efficiencies, these common administrative platforms, payroll consolidation, and relocation of functions in lower-cost duty stations. When we speak about these targeted targeted efficiencies from the point of view of UNOG, you as Human Rights Council will not have a direct impact. There will be impact for activities of UNOG, including common administrative platforms and payroll consolidation and others, but I don't think you will see direct impact on your activities. But cost reductions, unfortunately, will have implications for the Human Rights Council. We will try to minimize the adverse effects on activities of the Human Rights Council, but of course there will be impact. I will just give you some facts and figures so you will see how the situation is going to develop. Again, I'm talking now about the budget, not the liquidity situation. For example, you know that the work of the Human Rights Council is really impacted by the work of conference management, of UNIS, of security, and of course of administration. So if we speak about conference management, their proposed reduction of the budget is 17%. When we talk about Geneva, the suggestions for the budget 2026 includes cutting 90 posts in Geneva. Of course, cutting 90 posts in Geneva will increase workload for remaining staff, result in continued backlogs, and of course, obviously, as a result, reduce services to the member states. That's significant. I know that you are already in an interaction with our conference management team. You asked for 15 weeks of meetings for the next year, and our team said that even within 100% of allocation of this reduced budget, unfortunately, it will not be possible. Many things like lunchtime meetings, unfortunately, will no longer be possible. Again, I'm talking about the budget. When we come to the liquidity, the situation might be more difficult because the liquidity situation will, depending what percentage of liquidity or the budget our conference management division will receive. 80%, 85%, 90%, we still don't know. And it's crucial to understand because we don't know if our division will be able to have temporary assistance. You know, we rely a lot during peak times on hiring interpreters. If at the same time, we still don't know how these new measures will affect other clients we have here in Geneva. Because if other entities will decrease their program, then there will be certain resources which could be used to support a Human Rights Council. But for the time being, of course, we are not aware. We can rely only on the budget. This year, we supported 181 meetings of the Human Rights Council. Of them, it's 139 plenary meetings. Well, we are not sure we will be able to deliver the same support for the same number of the meetings next year. It's about, well, conference services. Department of the Global Communications, they suggest to cut their budget by 15.4%. They propose to cut 5 posts here in Geneva. Also, when we talk about this division, the question is with a hiring freeze, because with the planned retirement and other movements of staff members, this division might really experience shortages of staff to deliver the current level of services. So the projection, even without talking about the liquidity, that our division will have to reduce the number of meetings which could be webcast, including those of the Human Rights Council, unless there are some extra budgetary resources and support for this work like we are receiving, for example, at the end of this year. We also try to mitigate this by deploying our Human Rights Treaty bodies webcasting capacity to cover some Human Rights Council meetings when schedules would allow this. But again, it will depend on the schedule. Further impact could increase reduced capacity for UN TV, with meeting coverage relying mostly on automated coverage, automated use of cameras. There will be also reduction. It's not about Human Rights Council meetings, but in principle, we think that there will be a reduction in scope and scale of UN Day, official UN Day celebrations, commemorative and outreach activities, and certain events will have to take place instead of in-person meetings online. So, security. Security is proposing to cut their budget by 14.8%, and there will be 28 posts here in Geneva which will be cancelled. That, of course, could impact our access control procedures, including gate opening hours, adjusting screening lines, and shortening of operating hours of the pass and ID offices. That already takes place in New York. They work only in the morning. As a result, there might be longer waiting lines and inconvenience for staff, delegates, and visitors. Also, one of the impacts, which will be also the impact for the Human Rights Council, the security presence in meeting rooms will be mostly limited to surveillance and interventions only. Screening will be done at very, very minimal capacity, and there will be limited support to VIPs and protocol assistance. That's about security. Speaking about administration, it also, of course, has the impact on the work of our conference management team. Administration is suggesting to cut its budget by 14% and to cut 59 posts for the next year. I made some statistics because I like to see the statistics. What's, for example, interesting, if we take administration, well, UNOG small administration library in my office, for which I have the full control and full figures. Comparing by 2015, in the year 2026, we will have just 2/3 of staff. So over these 10 years, we have cut, including the proposed cuts, 1/3 of staff posts. That's, of course, a lot, and of course, that has an impact on our activities. All in all, what are the propositions for the budget 2026? In principle, they consolidate the measures which we have been implementing this year in order to address the liquidity crisis. So all the measures which we have been implementing this year in order to fit within the allotment will remain next year as a part of a permanent budget. So, but at the same time, because of complex situation and interaction of different entities here in Geneva, of course, it's very difficult now to give you a clear impact of these measures. At the same time, one thing is positive. I don't want to sound very, very negative. We hope to improve the situation with the conference rooms because we will receive C building next spring. C building has one big council chamber room, so we will move conference of disarmament to C building. This room will be also used for events when conference and disarmament not in presence. And in principle, I would like to say that we hope that we are going now according to the current schedule. We close the building E on the 15th of September. On the one hand, it's difficult. We lost many rooms, and now we live within capacity of just 45% of the rooms available, just 45%. But at the same time, we go step by step, and we hope to deliver the project on the timeline, which was approved by the General Assembly at the end of at the end of 2027. Of course, it will also depend on the budget allocations we will be receiving in the years to come. Now, speaking about liquidity situation. About liquidity situation, as I said, it's very difficult to provide clear information. everything depends on timely and full payment of the member states, but our current situation is really very, very difficult. Organization has continued to go over 2 years of a very significant financial crisis with very strict spending restrictions, and because of these spending restrictions, we're going to close the year with areas with a deficit of more than $450 million. I say it's a good figure because we already had reduced spending by $600 million because of these measures. If we hadn't implemented these measures, which allowed us to save $600 million, the organization would enter the new year with a deficit of more $1 billion. That's a huge sum. And of course, the problem is also with the necessity to return $300 million in credits to the member states at the beginning of 2026, unless there is a decision of the member states to suspend this return. So Secretary General was very honest when he was addressing the Fifth Committee. He warned that the organization is in a race to bankruptcy. So for us, it's really very, very important to see the normalization of the situation with the liquidity. But of course, we have to be realistic and understand that it's, unfortunately, I'm afraid it's doubtful that it can take place. So what will mean for all our activities? As I said, we're asking practically all our entities, all our divisions are asking for the next year budget, which is a little bit less than real liquidity we received in 2025. So that means if we receive 100% of budget allotment, we will be able to deliver the same volume of services we've been delivering this year. If we receive, we don't know how much again, and we're afraid to make projections less, that means we will have to make new measures, additional measures, which we did not implement this year or the previous year, in order to live within this budget. And of course, there will be also, besides this budget, this impact of cut in the posts, and of course, the possibility that there will be not enough staff to deliver the same volume of work. I would like to say that as Director General of UNOG, my first priority is always to support multilateral process, to support conferences activities, which are in the heart of international Geneva. We tried to do it during COVID. We tried to do it during all these liquidity crises, so you can have confidence that we will try to do it next year in spite of all these challenges. Speaking about Workstream 2, mandate implementation review, as was already said, now there is a working group which should deliver its report at the end of March next year, and there will be also a previous progress report in mid-December this year. And in parallel, the Secretariat will advance the proposals contained in the mandate implementation report that fall, which come within our own authority. Workstream 3, structural changes and programmatic realignment. Secretary General presented his report, Shifting Paradigms, United to Deliver, just on the eve of the high-level week in New York. And this progress report proposes 3 sets of paradigm shifts for the United Nations system. Shifts within each pillar: peace and security, sustainable development, and human rights, shifts in how we work across pillars, and shifts in how we enable our operations collectively. Of course, High Commissioner will be the person who will speak about this impact on the Human Rights Council. So before handing over to him, I would like to say that UN80 initiative will have an impact on the work of Human Rights Council, but we can predict this impact if the budget is approved and we receive 100% of the allocation. But of course, if we will not receive 100% of allocation, there will be additional impact on our activities. Once again, we'll try to have all measures which we can have in place to mitigate the negative impact. But of course, there will be impact.
Thank you very much. Not much joyful news, but thanks for making these figures that are sometimes abstract more tangible in terms of impact here in Geneva. High Commissioner, over to you for more good news.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for organizing this. I think for both of us, for the Director General and myself, it's important to be able to give you a brutally honest picture of where we are. And I think it's important that we provide this to you and that we work with what the picture actually reveals. So what I will do is I will first of all give you a quick review of the financial crisis that we faced in 2025. I'll give you an outlook on 26, and then I will outline the impact that it has on the Human Rights Council work, but on the human rights ecosystem more broadly, because I think this is, as we all know, very much interlinked. When it comes to the financial situation in 25, as you know, we had an approved budget, a regular budget of approved budget of 46 million. But because of the liquidity crisis, we only got an allotment of 76%, which means in terms of funding that we got from the regular budget, it was 179 million. As you know, we also depend very much on extra budgetary funding, including unearmarked funding for some of the mandated activities because of the way it has evolved over time. But actually now we see that this becomes very apparent. When we look at current projections for extra budgetary funding, it stands around 240 million, but this is 29 million less than last year. So if you look at the double impact of RB and XB, in total, we have a gap of about 96 million. By the way, I will provide my notes to you, so don't need to write down all the figures, but just I know this is, because it is quite complex, but we will provide you with the talking points. So the total gap in 25 is $96 million. In terms of the RB, the regular budget, we have, as the Director General mentioned, a hiring freeze, which was imposed in April this year, which of course means that we cannot hire people, which has a direct impact, for example, on investigative bodies. At the moment, we are at a reduced capacity of 50 to 60% of the staffing levels that were authorized. It also means that critical positions to support the Human Rights Council, the humanitarian funds, the petition section in the treaty body area remain unfilled because these are RB posts that we could not fill. I mean, obviously, if we look ahead, and the Secretary General, I was at the Chief Executive Board last week, he predicted a very high level of uncertainty and unpredictability. We need to be very much aware of this. When it comes to 26, the original program plan for 26 was set at about, for the regular budget, at 249 million, which includes requests for 59 new posts aligned with the Pact for the Future. Because if you remember, the Pact for the Future, the leaders actually said that there needs to be an increased, more sustainable funding for the human rights ecosystem. And because of our own reform efforts, we have actually looked at regionalization, in particular strengthening our regional presences, because we want to be able to respond much better and much quicker to the many requests that we get from member states in terms of technical cooperation and assistance. So the original budget submission for 26 for the regular budget amounted to 249 million. But, as you just heard, given the financial crisis that the organization is facing, we had to reduce by 15%, which means that the proposal that is currently before, well, went through the ACABQ and then now is before the fifth committee. Well, we don't know, I haven't seen yet the results of the ACABQ. I mean, so what we put forward is a revised 26 budget of 211 million. So it is a significant reduction because it's 15%. And there are many details about a combination of post-abolitions, 105 posts that will be abolished as a result of this, but also posts that had been adjusted from the original 59 additional posts. We have reduced it to 23. We have seen that regionalization helps us save costs, could be a cost saving of about 2.4 million. But we also had to reduce, and that is very important for the human rights pillar, the level of funding for short-term staff, for consultants, for activities, for travel, and that's a reduction of approximately 22 million, which is considerable. So it is very clear that the 15% budget reduction for 26 will impact not only the various mechanisms, but also my office's operational capacity. When you look at 25 and the work and the intensive work of the Human Rights Council, you will see that the Human Rights Council adopted in its 3 sessions 93 resolutions. Out of these 93 resolutions, 79 resolutions had PBIs, I mean program budget implications, meaning if you count that all together, it's about $96.3 million. And some of these resolutions with budget implications will have to be implemented in 26. Some will obviously continue to be done in the course of the years to come. But we were also asked to reduce the revised estimates by 10%. So it's clear that even the revised estimates with the reduction, the outlook for 2026 is grim. And just from a budget perspective, but also then if indeed, which may be likely, we face again a liquidity crisis, because then it means that even if you have an approved budget of, let's say, 211, if all goes well, plus the revised estimates, which would be some 14 million for next year, you would have a liquidity crisis, let's say, of 80%. You would have an amount that is probably less than what we have this year, with more requests and more work to be done. So what's the impact? I mean, it is clear that it has a direct impact on the work of not only of the Council. And I mean, for example, we have seen with the liquidity crisis that it has directly affected the Council because it was compelled to reduce 7.5 meeting days across the 59th and the 60th sessions. The word count in reports is 10% less, so I mean, of course, also on the reporting. The ongoing hiring freeze, the staffing shortages that we are facing, they put particular strain on the Secretariat, on the Human Rights Council Secretariat. And I have to say, we are really at the breaking point there, because we have also done some unearmarked funding for it, but we don't have the unearmarked funding anymore. So we have to squeeze, unfortunately, the Secretariat services that we are able to provide. The same, of course, on the substance. As you all the mandates, there's not one single mandate that isn't affected in one way or another. All mandates, both the thematic but also the country-specific mandates, are affected. We have to reduce them considerably. So they are basically reduced to a significant extent, which means, in terms of concerns, we are not able to highlight certain practices. We are not able to deliver the reports in the way that we would like them to. We are not able to, even in Beijing +30, we are not able to deliver 4 Human Rights Council mandated reports, for example, that seek to advance women's equality and rights. So we are faced with a situation that has direct impact on the thematic and substantive side of our work. As you know, the Council has also taken considerable steps to enhance our work on emerging human rights themes, social cultural rights, right to development, digital technology and human rights, children's rights, biodiversity and so forth. But we are unable to fill a significant portion of posts that had been approved in the past. So because of the budget and the hiring freeze. And some of these positions were also accompanied by funding for meetings, for travel, and again, that has to be drastically reduced. When it comes to the universal period, that's the Council, universal periodic review. The funding and the staff projections for 26 will drastically limit the UPR Secretariat's ability to deliver on the reviews as they are scheduled. So we are looking obviously at possible options so that we are able to continue servicing the mechanisms. And we will engage with you and with the Council's Bureau precisely in this regard, because we can't afford, obviously, a dent on the UPR. But it will affect it as well. On the investigative bodies of the Human Rights Council, we have seen with the liquidity crisis that it has already affected the implementation of the investigative mandates. We had to scale back investigations because of the limited staffing between 50 and 60%. Obviously, that has a direct impact because we are not able to do the work in the way that it should be done from an investigative perspective. So we are not able to meet all the requirements on the investigative track. And as you know, we have had an issue both with the Commission of Inquiry for the Democratic Republic of Congo, but also when it comes to, for instance, the new decision on Afghanistan, which is not within our budget, but it is within the human rights pillar more generally. Which means the risk of violations and abuses, if they are undocumented, will increase. It weakens the prevention side of the work of the Council. The voice of victims will not be heard in the way that they should. And the deterrent impact of these mandates risks being lost. But I would also like to reiterate the importance of ensuring that the investigative fact-finding bodies are equally and adequately funded through regular budget, because we need to avoid and counter any perceptions of selectivity and double standards. And I think that is very important. I just want to repeat this here as well. On special procedures, as you know, you have heard it from probably special procedure mandate holders, it has impacted on their ability to engage with states and national actors. More than 50% of their activities for 25 had to be cut. Country visits were reduced by half. We only were able to do 44 out of estimated 92, which again limits the ability of special procedure mandate holders, very often also requested by yourselves, not either to go on mission or to be able to deliver in the way that it's foreseen. The working groups under the special procedures were only able to hold 2 in-person sessions instead of 3. It meant that in some instances they were not able to work on some of the individual cases that were put before them. The coordination of the special procedure system was affected. For example, we had the second consecutive year where there were no induction and introductory meetings for new mandate holders, and the coordination committee was only able to hold 2 in-person meetings here and not 3, and some of the issues that they discuss are very sensitive, so it's not something that you can necessarily do always online. The staffing shortages have also meant that the capacity of special procedure mandate holders to be able to respond to a lot of requests that they got from states, they're simply not able to do it in the way that it was envisaged. On operational capacity of my office, because again, in some instances under item 10, as you know, there were a number of Human Rights Council resolutions that were drafted to support your work. And just to give you one example, when 2 years ago, the CARICOM, we had a CARICOM, very strong CARICOM, mandated, and through the Human Rights Council, mandated establishment of a regional office. The Council resolution approved 16, through the PBI process and the budget process, approved 16 posts. We were only able to fill 6 out of the 16. Because of the combination of regular budget cuts and not being able to fill posts, but also extra budgetary funding decreases. In Colombia, for example, we had to close 3 out of 8 offices, and we had to cut 46 out of 120 posts. We had to reduce our human rights advisors in a number of countries, and we are not able to 7 in total, but there are 12 requests, so we are not able to fulfill them either. We could not provide, we have reduced capacity to provide technical assistance to national human rights institutions. We're not able to respond to a lot of capacity building at the regional level that was requested, and we will need to reduce the footprint, operational footprint in a number of country operations, including Guatemala, Honduras, Mexico, Niger, Guinea, Guinea-Bissau, DRC, Tunisia, Myanmar, and Yemen, because of the financial situation. Obviously, because of our own reform efforts, we are trying to see how we can build up at least some country coverage and thematic capacity at the regional level, but again, this is before the budget process now in New York. Treaty bodies. I have to say the treaty body system is seriously fractured. And if this continues, it's going to break. Instead of the budget for 25, instead of the 92 budgeted weeks, 92 meeting weeks, the treaty bodies were only able to meet in 61 weeks. 49 of the planned state reviews could not take place. And for instance, the special, the subcommittee on the prevention of torture had to cut their visits by half. Over 100 cases submitted by individuals could not be decided, and we have 500 new cases awaiting an in-depth legal assessment. So again, it also means that the role of providing, frankly, quasi-judicial functions we are not able to meet. So it's clear that the UN80 process in all its, especially work stream 2 and 3, are extremely important because we need to make sure that as the UN80 process is being implemented, and we will be able to participate in the peace and security and in the development side, because we need to make sure also at the country level that there is a human rights component, both in the country configuration that is being taken into account, but also in the regional integrated platform. The regionalization strategy of the office will help in this regard. And then there is the proposal, and to have a human rights group established to make sure that we not only mainstream and streamline human rights within the system, but also to ensure that the interlinkages that we have with the other pillars is made clearer and more effective. It's also important, because of the reform efforts, that we as an office are able to, working with all of you, to continue investing in technology, digital process optimization. But it is also true that these things, especially the digital footprint, doesn't come without cost. So we need to make sure that the digitalization process, that it's not halted now as a result of the budget crisis. In the context of the human rights, in the context of UN80, we have given ourselves quite a bit of thought about and building on the rationalization efforts of the Human Rights Council. We have given it a lot of thought about what could be interesting ideas for the Human Rights Council, and we will share a non-paper for your consideration. Don't shoot us. It is our ideas about the Human Rights Council, which may help you in your own reflections, and building very much on, I know, on the efforts by the Council President and the 2 facilitators on the rationalization efforts to see how we can work on this together, because of course we are in the same boat on all of this. And I think the rationalization efforts and some of the ideas that we have about the Council could help us manage this extremely dire situation. And I think building obviously also on the mapping tool that was established, which provides this comprehensive overview of mandates, but it needs to be developed further because there needs to be the link to the financial side as well. I also would hope that we could work with you and with the treaty bodies on a new overhaul of the treaty body system. We have some ideas about this. The last attempt took 10 years. We don't have the luxury of another 10 years for treaty body reform. In fact, I would hope that if there are member states that are interested in treaty body reform with the chairs of the treaty bodies, that we could have a one-year process that could really seriously look of how we can make that a more effective and not only effective, but also a process that links up to all of that. If I may say, obviously, I'm committed very much to full transparency and working with you into the best possible ways. It has been extremely difficult this year. I know that we have all been very unhappy with this as a result. We will not be able to increase the happiness. We can only increase it if we are working together. And if I may, 3 asks to you. The 5th committee engagement is absolutely key. There is a disconnect between Geneva and New York. I have to be very frank with you because I sometimes talk to your colleagues in New York and they have very different ideas even about the functioning of the Council and so forth. So there needs to be much stronger alignment between, frankly, what's happening here and New York, and it has to translate into the budget. Obviously, we continue needing unearmarked funding. So whatever amounts some of you may have before the end of the year, there's a very good address where you can send it to, and I would be very grateful for that. And to also seriously think about an impactful strategic view of the Council as we go forward, and what could actually be done collectively to make sure that we can use the existing constrained resources in the most effective, impactful and strategic manner. Thank you.
Thank you much, High Commissioner. Thanks for making this tangible for all of us. While it's not nice, it's tangible. We're going to open the floor, colleagues. Always the same problem. We don't have sufficient time. I ask you, please, to keep your statements to around 1 minute 30. That would allow us to have around 30 speakers. I will need to stop not long after 2 p.m., come back to the High Commissioner and the DG for responses to your comments and questions. If in the end you have questions that you didn't have the possibility to ask, please send them in to the President's office or the Secretariat. We will try to bring them together and find answers. Civil society organizations who would like to take the floor, please ask or get in touch with the Secretariat here. I think that's all I needed to say. I want to start with the Ambassador of New Zealand, who has some additional information on the second work stream as it is undertaken, launched in New York. I don't see her, but you have to, here is, you have the floor. Here she is, sorry, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and thanks for hosting this meeting today. There's so much work going on. It's great to be able to have the chance to discuss. As you said, I'm going to just give a brief update on the mandate review. As we've heard from the Director General and Ambassador Lauber, New Zealand and Jamaica are co-chairing this process in New York and have established a work program under the informal ad hoc working group, which is looking to finalise its work by the end of March next year. Work on that is well underway, And the focus is on a system-level forward-looking changes across the mandate life cycle, rather than rationalising existing mandates, as we know from our discussions here, is a pretty tricky and complex process. So the idea is to sort of build an atmosphere of trust and open-mindedness for the change that will be required. And it's an opportunity to sharpen the UN's prioritisation and draw a clearer link, as we've heard today, between decisions taken by member states and the resources that are required to deliver them, which is way out of alignment at the moment. And the co-chairs are really conscious that this is not just a technical exercise. We're going to need a political and an engagement strategy to underpin the technical process. And I think that's where former attempts to reform the system have fallen down. So a 2-month program of informal briefings and consultations is already well underway, began in October, and that will carry on until December. This is what the co-chairs are calling a discovery phase, and it's structured around consultations on the 3 main stages of the mandate life cycle: the creation of the mandates, the implementation of the mandates, and the review of the mandates. And these briefings are really wide-ranging, involving panellists from the UN system, member states and external stakeholders whose insights are helping inform contributions by the informal ad hoc working group members. And these consultations are all being webcast for transparency. In parallel, there are targeted consultation and outreach being undertaken with the UN system entities, including those in other locations such as Geneva, civil society and think tanks. And a report back on this discovery phase, as the Director General said, will be presented to the General Assembly by mid-December. Now, the discovery phase is going to be, the plan is, to be the basis for consultations on principles and actions for each of the 3 stages of the mandate life cycle, with the view to coming up with a package that can be agreed by consensus for the end of March. The New Zealand and Jamaican teams are working really closely with the UN Secretariat to source additional data and analysis that underpin the Secretary-General's recommendations. And to ensure transparency, the Secretariat has established a dedicated website for the process where contributions received and documents issued to the informal ad hoc working group are published. I think the OHCHR's mandate mapping exercise will be a useful contribution to this. And the Secretariat has also launched an online mandates registry that serves as a tool for searching and aggregating data on existing UN mandates, and at the co-chair's request is providing training to member states on how to use that tool. The co-chairs are interested in coming to Geneva if member states would find that helpful, and if we do think that would be useful, I think they're looking around mid-January to make a visit here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you, Deborah. I have the first 5 are Mexico, Egypt, China, France, and Russia. Mexico has the floor.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Madam General Director and High Commissioner, for this useful conversation. I think that we have to have more on these debates. As you know, Mexico, together with Norway, co-lead the UN80 Global Initiative, an interregional coalition that includes Indonesia, Jordan, Kenya, New Zealand, Senegal, and Singapore. And our shared goal is to promote multilateralism and to uphold an open and forward-looking perspective on the 3 main areas of work under the UN80 initiative: administrative efficiency, the review of mandates implementation, and structural reforms within the United Nations system. The UN80 Mexico supports approaches that are results-oriented and focus on generating tangible benefits for people and their needs. We will promote efforts to rationalize, integrate, and, where appropriate, relocate existing mandates and structure. In doing so, we aim to strengthen coordination and coherence across institutions, avoid duplication, and enhance the effectiveness and efficiency of the UN system work on the ground. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Egypt, please.
And thank you for the Ms. Valovaya and the High Commissioner. I'm talking about two concerns that we have. First is, and I think that the High Commissioner pointed to this, which is there is no good linkages between what's happening here and New York. And we're discussing reform. Reform must not be something that happens to Geneva. It has to be something that happens with Geneva. So I think that we need also here to think about ways to get our views. Of course, I mean, we talk to our missions, but we need something that comes from here, from the membership, and input to the process there. This is something that we have to think about. The second concern is cost saving. Cost saving is necessary, but there is also a need to preserve the core functions of the Council and the nature of the meetings. I can see that there are shrinking space for us to interact, to minimize the time for the meetings. So perhaps if we are thinking about this matter, we should try to look at the mandates and see what is the priority. Is the priority for us to have a space to talk together, or maybe we can postpone some of the other activities that takes place? But I'm very concerned about the shrinking space here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. China.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you very much. I wish to echo the previous speakers by thanking the Director General and High Commissioner for their very comprehensive update for the current situation. I wish to appreciate the services provided with the background of such a liquidity crisis. So, in short, China will continue to support the efforts of the UN agency and the efforts and the process of UN80 reforms, to provide necessary support, both in terms of financial and other aspects. And I wish to share a couple of thoughts with regard to the how to better promote and protection of human rights. Firstly, I can assure you we will continue to support the High Commissioner and his office to conduct its business within the mandate. And with the reform, I should say we support all the measures to streamline, to raise of efficiency and effectiveness, and in the meantime, to have the right priority. As the ambassador from Egypt indicated, we need to plan our program based on the income rather than the other way around. Well, we need to have the right focus. And of course, for the next point is we'd better try our best to the depoliticization and to have more focus so as to have a balanced approach to the all three pillars. And as well as the more focused and the input on the right of development and economic and the social rights. Last but not least, I wish to flag again during the process, we wish to see the underrepresentation of the developing countries in the Secretariat will not be exacerbated. I have question was that just to pick your brain, how to synergize the various agencies, human rights related during the process. Thank you very much.
Thank you much. France, please.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Et un très grand merci à la Directrice Générale et au Commissaire pour cette réunion qui est vraiment particulièrement utile aujourd'hui. Quelques brefs points. D'abord, bien noter les demandes du Haut-Commissaire.
Just, vive la francophonie. We don't have translation. Just, okay.
Je suis sûre que nos camarades sont francophiles et tentent d'apprendre le français et que ceux qui ne le sont pas trouveront un voisin généreux pour leur traduire mes propos. Et la réponse est la plus importante de toute façon. Donc rapidement, merci Monsieur le Haut-Commissaire pour les propositions. Sur la 5e commission, Nous sommes totalement convaincus, évidemment, et nous avons même envoyé notre ancien RP à New York pour nous assurer que vous auriez tout le soutien. Et je suis complètement d'accord avec ce que vient de dire l'ambassadeur de Chine sur l'importance d'avoir une approche équilibrée entre les piliers. Et c'est pour cela, justement, parce que ce pilier droits de l'homme est le plus faible, qu'il faut absolument le renforcer à New York. Merci aussi de porter la discussion sur le volet stratégique de ce que nous voulons pour l'avenir du Conseil et l'avenir aussi des organes de traité. C'est une question fondamentale sur laquelle vous pouvez compter sur l'implication de la France. Madame la directrice générale, merci beaucoup pour la présentation de la situation et des conséquences des réductions de budget et d'effectifs prévues. Je comprends que cette présentation se fait par les Français a des conséquences Je comprends que la présentation que vous avez faite se fait, comme on dit dans les problèmes de mathématiques, toutes choses égales par ailleurs. Maintenant, ce qui nous intéresserait, je pense, c'est de savoir quelles sont les réformes et les réorganisations, mais aussi les innovations, notamment technologiques, qui sont prévues ou qui sont envisagées pour maintenir la qualité de service nécessaire pour les États membres et pour nos activités ici à Genève. Et ma dernier point, compte tenu de l'importance des 3 canaux d'ONU 80 pour Genève, comme le disait très justement l'ambassadeur d'Égypte, je voulais vous demander quand est prévue une nouvelle mission du secrétaire général adjoint chargé des politiques, parce que je pense qu'il est important que nous puissions à nouveau faire connaître les priorités et l'importance de ce qui se passe à Genève et que ce soit bien pris en compte dans ces travaux. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Russia is next, followed by Morocco, Costa Rica, Bangladesh, ISHR, and Liechtenstein. Russia, please.
Good afternoon. The Russian delegation expressed its gratitude for convening today's meeting. We strongly believe that the unconditional transparency is one of the most important requirements regarding the UN80 initiative. There is no doubt that this reform process should be a state-led, inclusive, and absolutely transparent. Given an anonymous adoption of UNGA Resolution 79/318, the states clearly reiterated their constructive intention to play a central role in this initiative. The Russian Federation is firmly convinced that the whole reform process should be strictly in line with UN chapter, as well as in accordance with established procedures, taking into account the necessity to have clearly defined objectives and evidence-based approach, including a comprehensive analysis of the potential expected advantages and costs, and a thorough legal basis of the measures that are to be taken upon the endorsement of by the states. We believe that the relevant efforts should be focused on addressing the issue of duplication and ensuring effective and efficient mandate delivery across all 3 pillars of the work of the United Nations. We fully share the idea that all 3 pillars should be treated on equal footing without creating any artificial or latent hierarchy among them or prioritizing one of them over the others. We believe that it's necessary to eradicate the practice of groundless multiplication of mandates, which only leads to the useless overgrowth of the UN structure, not mentioning that many of the recently created human rights mandates and mechanisms, especially HRC country-specific mandates, are of an extremely politicized nature. In this regard, we'd like to use this opportunity to make a couple of questions, if you allow. In his recent statements, the UN Secretary General explicitly mentioned the idea of establishing some sort of a group on human rights, which is supposed to be led by the High Commissioner. Could you give us more information on that with regard to its mandate, functions, as well as the legal procedures and basis for its creation? Secondly, to what extent and in what way do you take into account in your relevant steps the provisions of the mentioned UNGA Resolution 79/318? How do you correspond and align the following reorganization of the OHCHR with this UNGA document, which gains the consensus support of all states? And last but not the least, could you provide us with more detailed information on the process of relocating the OHCHR staff from Geneva? And how is the practical interaction with the states supposed to be implemented now? Thank you so much for your kind attention.
Thank you. Morocco is next.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Of course, I would like to thank Madam Director General and High Commissioner. Of course, there is a lot to say, but I will limit myself to only one idea I came with on behalf of my delegation this afternoon. And this idea is based on the fact that we strongly believe that it is now for us the time to reflect on which way we should improve the ownership of human rights commitments and, as said by High Commissioner, the ecosystem itself without waiting on UN resources. Let me give 2 or 3 examples. One of our commitment as Morocco, but with many others, of course, is that I would like to recall our contribution to strengthening the national mechanism network alongside with Paraguay and Portugal. And through the launch this past year of the international network, as I said, of national mechanism, and the drafting of the principles and rules which will, guide this framework. Secondly, I would like also, to say that as announced in our national statement during the last session of the Council, Morocco will be fully engaged with other partners for the preparation of the 5th cycle of the UPR. And we have we are preparing some important initiative going that way. We need to take stock of the many proposals and views on how to improve this process of UPR, particularly when it comes to the implementation of the recommendations. The endeavor will require, as I said, inclusive meeting in Geneva and also in the capitals. Finally, it has been said this afternoon, but I would like to insist, as you, Mr. President, I did my best last year to strengthen the coordination with New York. So the necessity of the strongest coordination possible with New York towards achieving the objective of now, the UN80 process, keeping in mind that next year, the UN General Assembly will have to consider all the outcomes of the Human Rights Council as an echo to the review process. I would like also, of course, to insist on what have been said by High Commissioner on the treaty body systems. We have to draw some what have from all the process which took place in New York, and we haven't yet been successful in that sense. We will spare no effort to contribute to the success of the review process, and it is time for us, to derive from the uncertainty. UN80 must give us a new impetus to improve the human rights agenda and consolidate our many achievements. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you much. Costa Rica.
Mr. Chair, and I join all the my predecessors, thanking you also to convene this meeting. And I think that the full room that we have today shows that the transparency and the share of information is fundamental in these difficult times that we are facing. And that's why something I will invite, again, this is, I know we are very busy, but this is really on the top of all of us in our agenda. I think that we need more of these meetings, even though we don't have, but we need to make time for that, and I invite Mr. Valovaya and Mr. Türk to continue on this part, and also you, dear Chair. Second, this is a squaring of the circle in the sense that we are looking for more efficiency. At the same time, we are looking for efficacy on the ground, which means it's very complicated. I'm not saying nothing new, but I think that we need to be very clear among us what are what we are looking for. We have less money, but we have really challenging times. We need to continue to work on that. And this situation, my delegation is really concerned about the situation of the treaty bodies. The treaty bodies is not that I don't think the Human Rights Council is not important, it's very important, but the core of the ecosystem, as was referred by Mr. Volker, is the treaty bodies. And to have the 30%, more than 30% less of possibilities of timing to convene, less capacity for the reporting, is something that we need to work on it, and we need to take really care about that. Because I think we are focusing a lot on the Human Rights Council, but please do not forget the human rights treaty bodies that are fundamental for us. And I think that also the countries, we have a huge role to play, reporting, having better information and transferring information to them. And as a last point, I think that also we need to strengthen our communication with New York, and then probably my delegation will be more than happy to try to convene meetings with our colleagues online, with our colleagues in New York in real time, and we will be happy to work on that with other colleagues to have that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bangladesh, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. My delegation thanks Director General Madam Valovaya and High Commissioner Mr. Türk for their presentation. Mr. President, Bangladesh viewed UN80 initiative as an opportunity to reinforce commitments to the UN Charter's founding principles, peace and security, development and human rights. To that extent, we need to reorient the UN's focus to tackle contemporary global challenges like climate change, technological transformations, migration, geopolitical shifts, and how these areas impact on sustainable development, among others. Now, coming back to the ongoing efforts for a more impactful Human Rights Council under the initiative, our delegation wishes to highlight following points. First, while there can be efforts to enhance the inclusivity in different processes, the centrality of the intergovernmental nature of the UN human rights mechanism as a part of the UN system as a whole should be ensured. Second, we emphasize the need to streamline operations to reduce bureaucratic inertia, promote transparency, and foster greater cooperation between the Human Rights Council and other UN bodies like Security Council, General Assembly, and ECOSOC in a more focused way. Third, broader dialogue with member states needs to be fostered by the Human Rights Council to reduce politicization, enhancing cooperation among states in the promotion and protection of human rights. Budget crunch should not minimize these efforts. In this regard, there should be persistent efforts with a view to bridging the gaps among member states on different thematic issues and focus on streamlining. The revised 2026 budget outlines essential adjustments to address evolving global priorities and financial realities across the UN system. These revised estimates should underscore the need for prudent resource allocation while ensuring that the organization remains equipped to fulfill its core mandates. For the Human Rights Council, the proposed revisions carry significant implications for us. We fully sympathize with the OHCHR Secretariat, which is already challenged with overwork. Adequate and predictable financing is indispensable for the Council to sustain its workload, respond effectively to emerging human rights crises, and enhance technical assistance and capacity building for the member states. Budgetary constraints risk undermining the Council's ability to ensure timely monitoring, reporting, and follow-up on its resolutions and mechanisms. The 2026 budget revision should ultimately reinforce, not diminish, the centrality of core values to promote and protect human rights, ensuring that the Council remains fully empowered to promote and protect human rights for all without politicizing double standards and weaponizing human rights. In that regard, we consider...
I'm sorry, we have a long list still. If you can really try to keep it short with respect also to the speakers who still are on the list. Can you...
We consider that the effectiveness of Human Rights Council's mechanism should be maintained at any cost. We therefore emphasize the need to preserve the effectiveness of the most important mechanisms like the UPR. Thank you.
Thank you. ISHR.
President, we face a multidimensional human rights crisis. It's an accountability crisis with atrocity crimes perpetrated with impunity in Sudan, Palestine, Ukraine, and Afghanistan as we speak. It's a normative crisis characterised by attacks on women's rights and international courts and mechanisms. And it's a funding crisis, with the UN Human Rights Pillar starved of resources and victims denied justice and a voice. A recent ISHR report has found that the US, China, Russia, and Israel are among the most egregious contributors to this crisis. Despite this, the need for a credible, adequately resourced international human rights system has never been greater, both to address global challenges and to provide a vital platform for those denied justice at the national level. ISHR would call on states to take 4 key steps in this regard. First, states from all regions should form an alliance to defend human rights and multilateralism and reject lawlessness and authoritarianism. We welcome initiatives from Chile and the Netherlands and from Mexico and Norway in this regard. Second, states should protect the human rights pillar from disproportionate funding cuts. Any cuts to an already chronically underfunded pillar will substantially erode effectiveness and efficiency. Third, states should pay their dues in full and on time, support the Secretariat call to suspend the return of unspent contributions, and increase voluntary and unrestricted contributions to OHCHR. And finally, states must ensure that the funding crisis is not used opportunistically to limit civil society participation or to constrain the independence and effectiveness of special procedures, accountability mechanisms and treaty bodies. Thank you.
Thank you. Liechtenstein is next, followed by Argentina, Rwanda, South Africa and Jordan. Liechtenstein, please.
Thank you, President. We thank the panelists for their respective contributions. It is my honor to offer some considerations on behalf of Switzerland and my own country, Liechtenstein. The liquidity crisis has hit the already underfunded human rights pillar severely. In the context of UN80, it is therefore of utmost importance to protect the human rights pillar as one of the main pillars of the United Nations and to ensure the allocation of adequate resources. The three pillars are mutually reinforcing, and we can't strengthen the UN's ability to deliver peace and security or development in the absence of a strong human rights pillar. We emphasize the central role of the UN treaty bodies. Their independence and capacity to act must be guaranteed by sufficient, predictable resources in order to reduce backlogs and improve access for those affected. The Human Rights Council and the UN member states have a responsibility to constructively contribute to the process of reducing mandates and overlapping activities. At the same time, the Human Rights Council must preserve its ability to react to developments in the field of human rights that deserve its attention. It is crucial that the Geneva voices are heard directly in the New York-based discussions on UN80. We thank the President and the High Commissioner for their recent visits to New York. Besides the important exchange with leading UN officials, it is also important to exchange regularly with UN member states and ambassadors in New York. We welcome a stronger engagement by the OHCHR with member states in New York on this issue, and similar to Costa Rica, offer the support of our respective missions to facilitate such engagement. Moreover, it is also important that the OHCHR assists member states in this process by showing utmost possible transparency. In conclusion, it must be assured that the reforms lead to a more efficient UN, but also a more effective one when it comes to the promotion and protection of human rights and beyond. Finally, we reiterate the obligation of member states to pay their contribution in full and on time. I thank you.
Thank you, Argentina.
Thank you, Madam Director General and High Commissioner. I think it was a very productive meeting today. My delegation takes notes of today's briefing on the UN80 initiative and the revised budget proposal for the Human Rights Council for 2026. And as we look towards the future of the United Nations system, we believe it is necessary to confront certain realities. The agenda of the Human Rights Council has expanded far beyond its original mandate, venturing into areas where no added value is evident and where duplication with other UN bodies is frequent. This expansion has not necessarily produced better human rights outcomes. Instead, it has diluted attention and consumed scarce resources. Moreover, the lack of transparency in Council membership elections raises serious concerns. We are also alarmed by the recent withdrawal of several members, probably a historical record. This is not a coincidence. It is a symptom that the Council has become overburdened, fragmented, and increasingly difficult to operate within. The Council must first fix its working culture, prioritize, and discipline itself. While many mechanisms are extremely valuable, others are probably not so necessary. It is time to rethink how the Council functions. Efficiency, transparency, and a strict focus on genuine human rights challenges are not optionals. They are prerequisites for restoring confidence in this institution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Rwanda, please.
Thank you. I join my voice to those who already spoke before me to thank you. President, Director General, and High Commissioner for this timely and important discussion. Rwanda takes note of the revised budget and commends efforts to mitigate the impact of the liquidity crisis and appreciate the difficult decisions made to sustain activities and safeguard the programs that support national goals, especially for developing countries. Addressing the institutional reform, I have 3 points for consideration. One, for the hiring freeze and staff reduction, we stress that it's important to ensure balanced geographical representation to reflect the multilateral nature of the office. 2, accountability. We spoke about activities, but we wanted to hear more about monitoring the implementation of human rights commitments. We know that this is also affected, and we want to hear more on that, Mr. High Commissioner. And lastly, we understand the budget challenges. However, Rwanda sees emerging challenges such as climate change and disinformation, which affects human rights and requires space for open and constructive dialogue where we can jointly find solutions. How do we ensure that we create with innovation, as Mr. President has already done in this recent Human Rights Council, new ways of ensuring that we continue to have dialogue and find solutions, collective solutions. Where there are challenges, there are also opportunities, and we believe that a more elaborate collaboration with regional human rights mechanisms is essential in this reform. This will strengthen coherence between global and regional mechanisms, enhance efficiency while addressing duplication. I thank you again, and Rwanda remains engaged to support this important process. Thank you.
Thank you. South Africa, please.
President, let me join colleagues in also thanking you for convening this briefing. I also thank the DG and the High Commissioner for their briefings. President, I just want to raise 2 points. The first one is with regards to the rationalization of mandates of the HRC and the third committee. And the second point is with regards to the human rights pillar. On the first point, I just want to reiterate what we've raised before, our concern about the increasing duplication and overlaps in mandates between the HRC and the third committee. As you are aware, there's a study conducted by the Geneva-based think tank, the Universal Rights Group, which has concluded that 54% of the third committee human rights text have a direct equivalent to resolutions adopted by the Council. And also 46% of third committee human rights resolutions, they contain some degree of overlap with their closest Council counterpart. Surely this situation of duplication is something that we cannot countenance because it amounts to a waste of resources as these resolutions have PBIs. So what measures are being contemplated in the context of the rationalization pillar of the UN80 process to address this question? The second matter relates to the strengthening of the human rights pillar. The GA has not undertaken the review of the status of the HRC as directed by Resolution GA60/251. As a result, the HRC has effectively been operating on a provisional status since 2006. Surely this situation is not right, and how do we keep a linchpin of international human rights operating on a provisional temporal status for close to 20 years? So in this regard, President, in your engagements in New York last week, if you can share whether you raised this question with the PGA, whether there are any prospects for undertaking this long outstanding review, as next year, as we know, is the 20th anniversary of the HRC. Thank you.
Thank you. Jordan, followed by UK, Yemen, Iran, Bahamas, and Ethiopia. Jordan, please.
We thank the DG, the High Commissioner, and the President of the HRC for convening this exchange to discuss the UN80 initiative and the revised budget of 2026 and their implication for the human rights pillar and the work of the Council. For Jordan, human rights must remain the core of the UN and the central to all reform efforts. We also see the need for the human rights pillar and its mechanism to be more effective. Effectiveness should not be measured only by financial efficiency, but by the real and lasting impact on people's life and the enjoyment of human rights on the ground. Jordan is pleased to be part of the UN80 initiative with a group of countries, working together to ensure that the reform process strengthens the impact and credibility of the human rights system. We thank you for your continued engagement with the member state, and we look forward to continuing this ongoing open dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you. UK next.
Very much. I will try and be brief, but I wanted to add a UK voice to the gratitude for this session. Thank you, President. Thank you, Director General. Thank you, High Commissioner. We really appreciate and support what you are doing on the budget and these wider challenges, and particularly the transparency that you are demonstrating and pursuing today. Others have said it, but to reiterate, we here in this room are primarily responsible for ensuring that we protect the human rights system of the UN as a core pillar, a core function of everything that the UN does against all of the prevailing headwinds. In that spirit, we really appreciate, High Commissioner, your reference to the ecosystem as well as the Council, because in these times when we need to look across the board to rationalise and to do things differently, the ecosystem is important, and we need to strengthen that and ensure no de-duplicate, if you like. That doesn't mean, though, that things don't need to change, that we don't need to do things differently. As others have said too, we have a supply and demand problem, and those of us in this room, let's be honest, have limited control over either of those factors. Let's focus on what we can control, which to our mind means being bold, being creative, doing things differently in the context of the things that we have within our gift in Geneva. We fully support the efforts that are now well underway, I think, towards rationalisation. As member states know, we, the UK and the Philippines, as penholders on 2 resolutions on mandates, merged those 2 mandates at the last council. That's a drop in the ocean in the great scheme of things, but we hope that it proves the case, if you like, it's possible, and we look forward to working with others on what more can be done. We also fully support what we heard from our New Zealand partners about looking for efficiencies in existing processes. We fully support that too, and for what it's worth, would welcome that process coming to Geneva to engage here. I see the time's elapsed, so I will finish. Thank you.
Thank you. Yemen, please.
Mr. President, thank you for organizing this meeting and for the opportunity to exchange views on the UN80 initiative and its implication for the human rights system in Geneva. And many thanks to Excellencies, the DG and the High Commissioner for the detailed information on the impact of liquidity crisis. Yemen notes with concern that the current financial constraints and liquidity crisis have already affected the delivery of technical assistance and capacity building programs in the field of human rights for the 2nd year in a row, support from which many countries, including Yemen, greatly benefit. As the High Commissioner mentioned, these programs are essential for strengthening national capacity and promote and to protect human rights and to implement the recommendations that have been voluntarily accepted, where the need to give these programs more attention and priority. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Iran.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ms. Director General, Mr. High Commissioner, thank you for the meeting and for the briefings. Iran believes the ongoing financial crisis, as reflected in the revised 2026 budget, should not be viewed merely as a funding gap. It also points to deeper structural and political imbalances within the system, including the way priorities are defined and resources distributed. While some non-alarming country situations continue to receive multiple reports and mandates each year, pressing global challenges such as poverty, inequality, and the realization of the right to development remain largely under addressed. This imbalance not only affects credibility, but also undermines the universality and effectiveness of the human rights architecture. In this regard, Iran believes that the success of UN80 depends on restoring intergovernmental ownership and promoting structural inclusivity across the UN system. The privileges and asymmetries embedded in existing mechanisms must be gradually adjusted to ensure equitable participation, balanced voice, and shared ownership among all member states. And finally, one question: in light of the acute financial constraints reflected in the 2026 budget, how will the UN80 initiative ensure that ongoing reforms translate into genuine balance, both geographically and thematically, so that issues of real concern to developing countries, including the right to development, are not left behind? Thank you.
Thank you. Bahamas.
I echo the previous expressions of appreciation for this timely conversation. The universality of human rights and the rule of law are under pressure worldwide. The Caribbean and CARICOM more broadly is not immune to this global context. And in our hemisphere, there is growing concern about increasing tensions that have already resulted in loss of life. In this context, the establishment of the OHCHR Regional Office for the Caribbean, hosted by the Bahamas, now more than ever takes on greater significance. The office is a tangible expression of the region's commitment to advance human rights through cooperation and technical support. Its focus on economic, social, and cultural rights, climate justice, and capacity building is particularly timely. The Bahamas attaches high value to the office's ongoing initiatives, which have already strengthened regional cooperation and policy engagement on critical human rights and climate-related issues. We also wish to express our interest in learning more about the proposed human rights group under Workstream 3 of the UN80 initiative. And we wish to reiterate that for the Bahamas, the success of these reforms that are being undertaken depends not only on cost savings, but also on whether they enhance the UN's ability to serve all members fairly and effectively. And the Bahamas reaffirms its continued engagement in ensuring these reforms yield a stronger, more responsive, and more inclusive United Nations.
Thank you very much. Ethiopia.
Thank you, Mr. President, for convening this important and timely meeting. We thank the Director General and the High Commissioner for their briefings and continued engagement with Member States. We note the ongoing liquidity crisis has a notable impact on human rights works and mechanisms, including the operations of the HRC. To this end, we believe that addressing these challenges requires concerted efforts. At the same time, we wish to emphasize some key considerations from our national and global perspectives. First, reforms and budgetary realignments must reflect the principles of inclusivity, equity, and geographical balance. The revised 2026 estimates should ensure that all regions are adequately represented and resourced in the human rights architectures. Second, sustainable and predictable financing of the human rights mechanisms remains vital. However, such financing must not come at the expense of development and peace-building mandates. For developing countries like Ethiopia, progress in human rights is inseparable from economic growth, social justice, and the right to development. Third, Ethiopia encourages closer coordination between UNOG, OHCHR, and member states to ensure that reforms under the UN80 initiatives strengthen field presence, technical assistance, and national ownership of human rights implementation. Finally, we underscore that the need for budgetary discipline, transparency, and efficiency in all reform measures so that limited resources are directed towards tangible impact on the ground, especially in developing contexts where the needs are greatest. Ethiopia stands ready to engage constructively in the ongoing discussions on these matters and to work with all partners. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. The next on my list are EU, Pakistan, Finland, and the Netherlands, but I will have to stop at 2:10 EU.
Excellencies, High Commissioner, the Director General, really thanks for this excellent briefing, really timely. Thanks for the transparency. I mean, harrowing, I must say, both of the speakers, but you've churned out all the numbers, which I won't repeat here. But I mean, we are concerned. We are very concerned that at a time when we have to equip the Council to perform its functions, it's not adequately staffed and resources. And we like to say balance between pillars and so on. No, at the moment we are not seeing the balance amongst pillars. It's not only because of the limited budget, because particularly the human rights pillar is people's-driven compared to other pillars, we would argue, and hence the cuts are felt in a much more significant way. We have three big calls. One for the Secretary General to ensure sufficient funding for the pillar from the regular budget, as was also already flagged. But we also call the member states to fulfill their financial commitments and take responsibilities in the UN budget process to provide adequate financing and strengthen the system, including, of course, the Office of the High Commissioner. Thirdly, there was an important point, High Commissioner, that you made on the extra budgetary resources. This is really important. We can all make an extra effort to provide additional volunteer contributions. The EU and the member states have the honor to field over half of them, including, importantly, unearmarked funding, which is I think your third asks. On the, timing is finished. So let me just say full support on the rationalization effort. Very grateful for the non-paper that was announced and that will align to the efforts of the two co-chairs. And finally, importantly, the point made in terms of efficiency, we have to leverage AI tools, hybrid modalities for conferencing, and measures to improve processes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pakistan. Sorry.
President, and thank the Director General and the High Commissioner for the briefing. I would just say that this meeting was focused on the challenge that we have in terms of finances and how to conduct our business. I think this is a time not to pull apart, but to pull together. And this is the approach that, especially as Pakistan contributes here and as a newly elected member of the Human Rights Council. I think this is not about stating our political priorities. So since most of my colleagues have expressed the ideas that I wanted to express, I would yield the time. Perhaps it would cover for my colleague from the EU, or would give the President an opportunity to take another one on board. This is the little we can contribute. Thank you.
Very important message anyway. Thank you very much. Finland.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and DG High Commissioner. Thank you for organizing this conversation, and really both your leadership in this process is extremely important. That the UN80 process is conducted in this way, openly, transparently, with all stakeholders present. I will have two short points. One relates to the independence and effectiveness of the human rights bodies and mechanisms. And for us, we have to make sure that during this critical time, it is safeguarded and actually should be strengthened. And so I have two questions related to that. First of all, how do you, Mr. High Commissioner, streamline and prioritize during this time when you have to decide what mandates you are able to fulfill and what staff you are able to keep and which ones you have to let go? And also, how do you make sure that the human rights pillar is and the reform is not, the other pillars are not overshadowed by the human rights pillar, that we keep the strong human rights pillar in this? And my last point regards to the UN treaty bodies. We very much share Costa Rica's concern about the situation of the UN treaty bodies. So maybe we would, it would be interesting to hear how the situation of the treaty bodies can be better addressed within the UN80 process. Thank you.
Thank you. The Netherlands, if you promise to be really brief.
Oh, you're giving me the honor to provide the last statement. I'll try to be very brief, although it's going to be a task. Thanks for convening the session. We do think that the UN80 initiative represents a crucial opportunity to revitalize the entire UN organization, but this, however, should be done with a focus on protecting and strengthening. Decisions about reform must be based on relevance, responsiveness, and effectiveness. When it comes to the human rights pillar, we are, of course, very concerned about the bleak financial situation. It's already a very small part of the UN budget, and cuts have a disproportionate effect. So while there's always some room for efficiency gains, we just simply cannot do more with less. We cannot even do the same with less. Let's be very honest with each other. And we believe that a differentiated and strategic and measured approach is necessary, and not so-called sledgehammer approach to budget cuts. And as my EU colleague said, we all call on all states to help ensure sufficient, unearmarked and, if possible, multi-annual funding to the human rights pillar. And financing human rights is absolutely necessary for economic development, peace and security. Not only absolutely necessary, but really critical and a precondition. And therefore, High Commissioner, we encourage you and urge you to continue to speak out and speak up in your demand for sufficient funding, and to communicate regularly and transparently about the UN80 process. I thank you.
Thank you very much. And I apologize to the colleagues who are still on the list and I was not able to give the floor. High Commissioner, back to you, and then we go to the DG to end.
Well, first of all, thank you very much. I think it shows how important this conversation is and this continuous engagement, but also the spirit that I find in Geneva to be one that actually brings us together and tries to resolve the issues that we have at hand. And when we try to resolve issues, it is really important to build on the achievements of each component of the human rights ecosystem, because sometimes there is a tendency, especially when we hear about reform and all kinds of things, that to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And I think it's really important to, first of all, look at what, for instance, the Council has achieved, what the treaty bodies have achieved, what the UPR have achieved. Of course, there's always room for improvement. That should anyway be the constant guide in all that we do. But I think there is also a tendency sometimes to say, okay, let's throw away the achievements, start from afresh and do something totally different. No, that's not the case. We have achievements. These are massive achievements. And we have actually, in this non-paper that I will share with you, we have tried to look at what the achievements are, for instance, of the Council from our perspective. And they are numerous. Of course, is it perfect? No, nothing is perfect in life. And the Council isn't perfect either, nor my office, nor the treaty bodies, nor anyone else. But that's why you actually have an impetus to find ways and means to address that. The one thing that human rights are, and I fully agree with a number of you, human rights are transversal. They cover each and every aspect of life. They cover our relationship with the environment, with the climate, and they have a very strong preventative role. There are numerous examples where the work of the human rights system, including in particular the Council, have had a preventative effect. We can't always talk about it, you can't necessarily attribute it, but it is there. And we should really be grasping this and not, again, weakening it in the current environment. So I think that's particularly important. And let's be honest, in the Secretary General's report, when you look at the financing of the UN system, the graph that struck me the most was precisely the one when it comes about the balancing of the pillars, because actually the human rights pillar in its entirety receives less than 1%. If you look at all the other pillars, it is basically spread across everyone else but the human rights pillar. So that's the reality, and we should not shy away from that reality. So it is indeed an underfunded pillar, and it remains to be an underfunded one, and you can beat around the bush. That's the reality, and I will, don't worry, I will keep speaking out as much as I can precisely about that fact. I have done that right from the start, and I will continue doing so. Of course, and that's the Secretary General's very clear instruction to all of us within the system, we have to ensure that we are not again throwing out the baby with the bathwater when it comes to geographical representation, diversity, and so forth. So we are monitoring this very carefully, and we are trying to make sure that in the implementation of not only the cost-cutting exercises and the prioritization, that we retain what fundamentally is about the United Nations. Fully agree, national ownership is key. But the national ownership is precisely nourished by the interaction that the system has with the regional and with the global level. And I can assure you, we have with all regional organizations, be it in the context of the African Union, ASEAN, Council of Europe, the Organization of American States, Inter-American system, and with the different systems in the Arab region, we have very close, OIC, we have very close links, and we work with these different organizations, because for us this is important. But you have this interaction that actually brings the best out of it and ensures that we can provide the support to build the national ownership. On the human rights group, a GA mandate, my GA mandate, that created the office, is actually the basis for the human rights group. We have to implement it. And that's what it is about, to ensure that human rights feeds into all the other pillars in an effective way, and that we are ensuring that indeed we have a mainstreamed approach throughout the system that is informed by human rights. On the mandate issue, I think it would be great if the two co-chairs could come. I think we all agree. I think precisely to have this interaction between Geneva and New York that needs to be strengthened. There are lots of issues that you have raised that actually go to the mandate track. The HRC tool is an important one. The duplication that we see, not only in relation to HRC, but also to the third committee, is definitely an area that needs to be addressed and needs to be looked at, including, by the way, we are already in this phase of having to postpone mandates, and that's a discussion that we always have with the Council, precisely because we need to find ways and means to ensure that they can be done. And just on UN80 more generally, action plans are being drafted. Of course, there is this strong engagement with member states, particularly at New York level, which is what the Secretary General said. And we will provide you not only with a paper on Human Rights Council, but also on treaty body reform. And I think we would like to reflect with you together on UPR and what we could do better in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. DG.
Thank you. Of course, I agree with everything High Commissioner said. Just a couple of concrete remarks. Speaking about Geneva and New York, I fully agree that we have to strengthen interaction between Geneva and New York. Thank you, co-chairs, for a suggestion to come to Geneva. I think it could be a good idea, if you think it's good idea, to also invite our colleague Guy Ryder to come here for interaction. I would like to remind you that he was here in summer, like the controller, and had an executive briefing, and I think it was very useful. He was also coming previous year to have an exchange for preparation of the Pact of the Future. It also allowed us to have Geneva dimension in the Pact of the Future, so that's one of the opportunities. I fully open for transparency meetings. Next meeting, by the way, I'm meeting non-governmental organizations from human rights sector to discuss exactly some concrete details of their being in the Palais. Every year, I normally start my year with meeting with you as regional groups. Normally, we try to organize it at the end of February, once we have more understanding about the budget and liquidity. So hopefully next year it will be the same pattern, and we will be able to inform you more about it. So I can't let unanswered the question raised by France, speaking about what we are doing in innovations and new technologies, etc. I would like to assure you that if we haven't done anything, we wouldn't be able to survive till now. I told you that, for example, we have cut practically by 1/3 the number of posts in administration. We can do it only because in all divisions we already have a significant progress in technology. For example, take security, we have introduced digital badges. We are the first duty station in the UN system who have introduced this. That allows to save lots of your time, delegates' time, but it also allows us to work with less security officers involved. Taking, for example, conference, we were the first in the system to develop Indica system of registration for conferences. Now we have to find money to support this system, but again, without this system, we wouldn't be able to function. Of course, our interpreters and translators, they are using lots of modern achievements. And one, for example, thing which is important for our budget to support the Palais is energy efficiency, and the SHP project, which allowed us really to become a very energy efficient, and we will become even more energy efficient at the end of the project, is one of the dimensions which also uses modern technology in order to raise our efficiencies. And of course, I would fully support the necessity to preserve the diversity, be it geographical or gender. So when we are making the decisions about our changes in staff positions, we are always taking this in account. Thank you once again for this meeting, and of course, we are open to the continuation of this dialogue.
Thank you very much, DG. On two issues that were raised concerning the duplication between Third Committee and Human Rights Council, related to that, the discussion between the Bureau of the Third Committee and the Bureau of the President here on the implementation of last year's Third Committee resolution is ongoing. I would caution, however, to approach this with a purely mathematical approach. There are reasons why issues that are being discussed in the Council should also be discussed in the Third Committee. And on the review of the status of the Council, I had a conversation with the President of the General Assembly last week, reminding them that this process is actually needs to happen. And we will also follow up on them. We made definitely the point that it's a New York-led process, but Geneva needs to be obviously involved, because I believe the relevant expertise is actually in Geneva. Thank you very much, colleagues. I think we have our work cut out. I very much want to repeat what our Pakistani friend and colleague said. The purpose of this meeting was not to scare you or devise us. We need to face the reality. We need to look at ourselves, come together, make ourselves more, not effective, but look at the volume. But also feel free to pick up the phone and call your friends in New York. They are about to go into Fifth Committee negotiations. That's where it's very important to really make the case for the human rights pillar. This is part of an ongoing conversation. I will keep in touch with the DG's office, with the High Commissioner's office. Maybe it would be useful to have another of these meetings once the budget has been adopted, which is probably only happening at best very close to the end of the year. So the next meeting will probably be chaired then by the next president. But thank you very much for attending this afternoon. Thanks again to our guests for the information. Bonne continuation. Merci beaucoup.